My understanding of the ICRC's approach to this is you accept that more than harsh language is going to be used in war, and we have to be realistic about this. There is going to be harm to civilians, there is going to be collateral damage, but that's why we have international humanitarian law to put limits on this. So if I can ask you, Kathleen, you know, what can be done? How can it work? Is there a way to make this acceptable? What's the view of the ICRC on this?
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. Perhaps to start off by saying that for the International Committee of the Red Cross, we have consistently called in recent years for parties to armed conflicts to avoid the use of explosive weapons that have a wide impact in densely populated areas. So avoid such use due to the significant likelihood of indiscriminate effects of these weapon systems. And this despite the fact that existing law today does not specifically prohibit these weapon systems. Now, this position is grounded in the patterns of harm that we are witnessing day to day in our field operations, where military operations, hostilities, are being conducted in populated areas. Simon described those effects very eloquently. I will not come back on those, except perhaps to add that in our own studies, and in particular in the studies carried out by ICRC engineers in water and sanitation, we have found that there are considerable knock-on effects, or indirect or reverberating effects, if you will, stemming from the use of heavy explosive weapons, to use the shorthand, in populated areas where in using such weapons there's a significant risk that parts of essential infrastructure will be damaged, and this indeed has an impact on essential services. So, for example, damage to essential water supply networks or electrical supply networks will have a knock-on effect on the functioning of a hospital, the supply of drinking water to the civilian population, and so on. So these effects, in our view, and this is where perhaps I get back to the legal aspects, these effects, in our view, are foreseeable, and these effects must be taken into account by militaries when prosecuting conflicts in populated areas, and must be taken into account when carrying out the assessments required by international humanitarian law under the prohibition of indiscriminate attacks, under the rule of proportionality in attack. And this is what we are aiming to do today in raising awareness about the issue of explosive weapons in populated areas, and in our dialogue with militaries around the world, is how are they incorporating these foreseeable effects of these weapons in their legal assessments when fighting in populated areas.
So you think then that this GICHD study will actually help the work of the ICRC in having that dialogue with armed forces?
Absolutely. I think the GICHD study is critical, and critical to building the evidence base and bringing the facts on the table about how these weapons are designed, what are their technical characteristics, and therefore what are their, what we might call, design-dependent effects when used in populated areas. Now, it's not just the design and technical characteristics of the weapon that determine their effects in a given instance. It's also the environment in which the weapon is being used, the particular density of the population, what are the materials that the buildings and structures in the populated area made of. All this information is critical to understand what will be the effects of these weapons. Therefore, this report is extremely useful, important. I should just add that the ICRC, the ICRC commissioned a report on indirect fire weapon systems that was published in January by Armament Research Service, and an important complementary report to the one that the GICHD has published.